Hi there traders, managed to get a couple of decent shorts in this morning on AGRX. One was during the pre-market and the second one was after the bell. The pre-market one, if you're around early enough, I actually called out live in chat. And in regards to the gappers this morning, there weren't a lot of great looking stocks that I like the look of to fade back down, which is what I like to do pre-market. And usually what I look for are stocks that are low float, so under 10 million, and the float on this one was bigger, and the price action was a little bit more awkward, which normally comes, as far as whatever time frame you're using for your main chart. I used a 3 minute, a lot of people use the 1 minute. As far as that particular time frame, say if you're using a 3 minute, the candles can seem quite messy, but I focus a lot more on the levels with the higher float stuff, and focus on them holding under or over those particular levels, as opposed to it touching to a T at a certain price and that's your entry or that's your exit. They just trade a little bit more differently, and they are a bit more messy if you look at them sort of as a close in time frame, like the 1 minute or the 3 minute. But overall, if you look at them on a higher time frame, and I don't trade with them on the higher time frame, although I do have the higher time frames up on a separate screen. But if you go to the 10 minute, for example, it just tells a bit more of a clearer story with that. So it's definitely worth looking at the higher time frames, especially with the high float stuff, and just see what the overall trend is as opposed to the level it's currently at. Just a little bit of advice there. But basically what I saw with this one, like I said, it's not a low float, and there wasn't a lot that I like the look of this morning, but this has been up the last couple of days. In fact, if I go to the daily, it's had two big green days for the low price that it is, and that's not to say it can't go higher. And indeed, this morning pre-market we'd gapped up considerably higher from where we closed yesterday, and that's not to say it couldn't continue, but you've got to ask yourself, is there more likely to be a pullback? In my opinion, day three, quite possibly, at least a pullback to a certain level, to just so it's not so extended. But that's not to say that you just want to jump in blind and get short and expect for it to just sell off. You've still got to wait for a setup. Now, for me, what I saw here, we made an initial pre-market high here of 317, pulled back, came back up, made a higher high at 328, and the pullback from this one was a lot more than I was expecting. It pulled back, and this green candle here with the wick, I mean, it's green now, but at the time, real time, this was a red candle which came down all the way to 282, and I just figured if this keeps on going now, then there's no trade here. It's going to be too extended to get shorts. What I wanted to see was for it to come down, come back up, make a lower high, and then get shorts and try and ride it down. It did do that, but I wasn't, again, the price action itself, it was a little bit difficult to read at times, but overall what I saw was this lopsided head and shoulders. You got the shoulder, the head, and then the shoulder there again, and I made two entries. The first entry was short at 296, and I added at 302, which gave an average of 299, and I was risking just over 307, which actually came up and tested to a T. And I did think at the time, okay, well, this easily could be a stop out. I was risking a couple of cents over, but I was wondering if it would shoot through. But what made me get short was that it was looking like a head and shoulders, and it come down way more than I expected on a normal pullback. And for me now, you've got VWAP above, you've still got room down to the hourly 9 EMA at this stage, which was right here at this red line at the time, and I just figured that there's a good chance now this is going to hold and pull down lower. So like I said, I took these entries. It did stay under the level I was watching for the stop out. It was a tight risk, so I was okay to get in. Now again, it wasn't a blind 50-50, okay, I'll get in because it's tight risk. There was method to the reason and to my madness of taking the trade where I did, and that was just because it was looking like a head and shoulders. It sold off more than it would normally. It come back up, it had VWAP to get through, and I just identified 307 as a level from this candle here, and if you just look left, you got this here as well. It just made sense to put it there. I was looking at the R1 pivot point, which is at 309. And when I've put the 307 line here with the stop just above, I mean, I would have probably given it till about 310, 311. But I just, at the time I said I was risking 307, but I would have allowed a few quick wicks. So I didn't have a hard stop in or anything, but a few quick wicks over I would have been okay with. It's as if it had have maybe started to look like it was going to hold that level and push higher, would have got out. But either way, it held under 307, and after testing that level, it just started to sell off. And I took my first cover at 290, and that's just because before it wicked lower for this candle here, that was the pre-market low, so it made sense to take some off there. And again, not a massive distance between where I got in, but at the same time I was risking tight as well, so it made sense to take some off there. My second cover was at 285, and that's just because 285 was yesterday's after hours high of day, so definitely made sense to take some off there. The one after that, this was the 280 level, and the reason I took it here is because you've got the after hours close level, which is this line here, and again on the hourly it's come down a little bit since, but that's also where the hourly 9 EMA was at the time, bang on at the same level. So I figured that would be a pretty powerful level and might be difficult for it to get through. So I had an order waiting there which filled, and as you can see, it did initially hold that level for a little bit. And again, these are 3-minute candles before actually breaking through, and I wasn't sure if it would break through or not, which is why I was taking my covers when I was as well. But it did eventually break through, and my next target was the pre-market open level here at 270, which got filled. Now I had some left over which I was going to ride into the open, and that's what I did, but unfortunately it stopped me out. So I'd moved my stop down to 290 from 3, and in hindsight that was a bit of a mistake, because come the open you can have these pushes. It would have made sense to keep the stop probably a little bit over the whole dollar number here, because quite often they can have a move like this before going lower. So unfortunately it was a bit of a frustrating stop out for me, so I stopped out at 293 there, and it only went a little bit higher and then started to come back down. Now the second frustrating error I feel I made was when it made a day high of 297 after the bell, and couldn't get over that, and was just consolidating underneath. And these are 3-minute candles, remember, so it was here for a little while, and just as it wicked over here I was very, very tempted to short it and then just risk off the 297 to see if it would be another trade where I could ride it down. And I just hesitated for that 3 or 4 seconds. I double checked what I was thinking and thought, no, I don't know. And by the time I was ready to take it, it just went, and it was quite a quick drop downwards. So I thought I'd missed the chance then. So I was a little peed off myself. But I just kept watching it, and it sold off, made a day low at the time of 261, and then started to come back up. And as it started to come back up, I said to myself, what I want now is for it to come back up to the 280 level, which was the after hours close, and the hourly 9 EMA level. And if it does do that, I'm going to have an order waiting a couple of cents underneath that to short, and I'm going to risk off the 285, which was the previous day's high of day. So tight risk, a good entry if it works. This isn't something that I'd recommend to newer traders or traders that aren't used to trading like this. Shorting into strength can be a double-edged sword. There are dangers with it as well, but within the context of this trade and the levels I'd worked out, I was happy to short into this, and I was only risking a little bit over it anyway. I took that, it filled, and pretty much straight away started to come down, and I decided to take half off here at 270, which was the pre-market open. Which same level I took some off back here. It did initially hold. I wasn't sure, maybe it would come down, hold, make a higher low, and then maybe push higher. That's why I took half off there. So then if it did come back up and then stop me out, it still would have protected the trade I'd had earlier, and I'd have been a little bit green on this one too. But as we just started to crawl back up, I actually decided to put an order back in to re-short it at the same level at 278. It came up and literally hit that to a T. I got a full fill on that one, and I added quite a few shares as well. And it filled me there, and it just started working again straight away. I was tempted to have an order waiting again at 270, but I just wanted to give this a chance to really play out, because if it was going to work the way we all thought it was probably going to work, Jeff definitely gave me some confidence when he was talking about it on the stream. For a pretty decent pullback. I decided to add there and not take any off there. I decided to take some off at 265, and that's just because after my cover here on the first trade, it came down to 265 and just couldn't get through it at all. So for whatever reason, 265 was a level, and I just decided to take some more off there in case that was the same again and it couldn't get through it. And as you can see, it initially pulled underneath but then held over for a few candles before actually pulling lower again. The next level I took profit was 260. I've marked 259. That's the previous gap level. Again, on the daily, I just worked it out that was the gap level from back here. So I always like to mark these in because they can influence the price action. So I definitely made sure to take some off there, and I wasn't sure if it would go lower than here, which is why I decided to take more off. But it did. It didn't really give it any problems whatsoever, and it just started coming lower again. So the next one was at 250, just because it's a $half level. I decided to have an order waiting there to cover some. The next one after that was at 243, which was the gap fill. So basically it filled the gap down to where it closed yesterday, not including the after hours, of course. So I took most of it off there. That the actual trade I took here was in mind that it was probably going to come down to the 243 for the gap fill, and then we'll see. But I did decide to keep some on just in case we did go lower, and I'm glad I did, because we initially came down, made a new low of day at 231, came back up after a few weeks, pretty much held under the $half level here, and then just started to pull underneath. Now as we started to come lower again, I decided to take some more off at the level it had made the new low of day, just in case it double bottom there. So I took some off there, and my final target, and I was all out at 204. So 202 is yesterday's low of day, and I decided to make it 204 just because there was a reason. I'm trying to remember. Oh, that was it. Back here yesterday, so we opened here and we came back down to retest it, but we didn't quite get there. We came down to 204, but we didn't quite touch it. So I just put an order in a couple of cents above the official yesterday's low, just to make sure I got the fill. And I didn't need to worry about that. Obviously it did come down and initially shot underneath, and it came and hit this 193, which I'd marked up in a light orange. And again, just going back to the daily, here at the 193, when I was looking at it earlier and I was drawing the other lines, I just saw this candle here, and it just dipped underneath, and I just decided to mark that. And as you can see, it came down and touched it to a T. So these levels, if you can identify them, it just goes to show they do work, and they can definitely give you confidence in your trading and for your targets. But that was the end of the trade. Ended up being two really good trades. I do wish I hadn't have moved my stop down to 290, or at least moved it back up for the open to allow for that extra surge of volume and an influx. So that was a small mistake there, and at the time, and still, I wish I had started a short there at 290. That just would have been a better entry again. But it did give me a chance to get back in, and I waited to see if it would provide that. But as tempting as it was to start jumping in as it started to come in lower, and even I get tempted like that sometimes as well with the FOMO. I just had to have a word with myself and said no, just wait to see if it comes back and presents another entry. So I managed to get back in, or managed to get in 12 cents under where I would have liked to have, but in the end it ended up selling off nicely, and it was still a good trade, so I can't complain. And I hope any of you that were around for the pre-market whilst I was calling this first trade live, I hope some of you managed to catch it as well. I'm normally around very early for the pre-market, normally a few hours before the open, This is where I like to focus a lot of my trading on, and that's just the way it's been for the last year or so. That's where the trades have been for me, and I'm often around early. So if you are an early bird yourself, feel free to ask questions and follow along. And if there are questions, you can either PM me. I'm always available, or you can just at me in chat in whatever room, and I will get back to you when I see it. And that's the end of today's recap, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.